Hey everyone. Um, my name is Lisa Sargent, and I'm the Census and Civic Engagement Coordinator for Texas Rising, a program of Texas Freedom Network. So I hope y'all are enjoying the training, taking notes, tweeting all the good nuggets of info that y'all are learning, all the good things. As excited as I am to jump right into our interview, I do want to take some time for Chris Hollins to tell us a little about himself, like what he did before becoming the county clerk and his trajectory into voter engagement work.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Texas Rising, for inviting me to come and say a few words. I also want to thank Communication Workers of America for sponsoring this section. Very important work that you are doing across the board to provide a fair shot for workers and laborers. But also, again, grateful for you all sponsoring this section. For those who are listening or watching, I've been a fan of Lisa since I met her. We are classmates, members of the same cohort in the NLC Houston chapter. And so I love Lisa to the death. I think she likes me all right. But again, I'm Chris Hollins. I serve as county clerk for Harris County, Texas. In that role, and we'll get into more details in a little bit, but we provide a number of critical services to the people of Harris County. Things like, anything related to records. So your birth certificate, your marriage license, court records, property records. But what's, really exciting to a lot of folks and very important to me, a core part of what we do is I serve as the chief elections officer for Harris County, Texas. So we have 4.7 million residents in Harris County, over 2.4 million voters. And so serving that group of people and protecting the right to vote for the people of Harris County is something that's very, very important to me. My background, I was born here in Houston. I grew up on the southwest side of town. I'm a fifth generation Texan and a fourth generation Houstonian. Very proud of that. Went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. Went from there to Yale Law School, where I got my law degree, and Harvard Business School, where I got my master's in business. I was very fortunate along the way to serve President Obama in the White House in 2009 in the Office of Presidential Personnel. And before and after graduate school, I worked at a management consulting firm. And so in that role, what I did was I'd step into very large public sector government organizations who were facing really steep challenges. And I would help them to think about their problems and solutions holistically, to think about how we could innovate to craft those solutions, how we could bring in best practices from across the globe, and how we could equip those public servants, the people who had been doing the work for so long, with the resources that they needed to have to be successful. And so, I've done some of that same work coming in to become the county clerk. I've only been the county clerk for probably about 8 weeks now. And so it has been drinking from a fire hose. I've been very fortunate to have a stellar team around me. And we delivered a safe, a secure, an accessible, a fair, and an efficient election for Harris County in July in our primary runoffs. And we're looking forward to do the same thing in November. And so, again, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, Lisa and Run the World, for having me.
Of course. Thank you, Chris, for coming. So I do want to ask, why is championing and advocating for voting rights so important, especially in the era that we are in now?
The era that we are in now, it says a lot about the importance of this work. First of all, you learn in whatever class in middle school, high school, civics, about the importance of voting and about how, every American citizen, has that fundamental right. But what we've seen across decades, centuries, in American history is that is not as true as it might seem, right? We started off with, white male property owners being the only ones, who could vote. At some point later, we said other men could vote. At some point later, we said other men who were not white could vote. At some point, we said women could vote. And as we moved even further forward to now, we saw, particularly in the era after Reconstruction in the late 1800s, early 1900s, through the Civil Rights Movement, what we call the Jim Crow era, systemic efforts to make sure that people of color in particular did not have access to the ballot. Things like poll taxes and literacy tests and anything that you could think of. Things like, can you guess how many jelly beans are in this jar? And if you don't get the answer right, you can't vote. And fast forward to 2020, and in Texas, we're seeing efforts aimed at voter suppression that we have not seen since segregation in the Jim Crow era. And so protecting the right to vote for all citizens, for all eligible voters, is something that I'm deeply passionate about and something that my office is very deeply committed to.
And I think that is a great segue into when you were speaking about just the restrictions and how over time and over different decades, voter disenfranchisement has manifested in different ways. So how do you and your office navigate voting accessibility when we have a state like Texas that can be very hostile when it comes to advocating for voting rights?
Yeah, and so, what we try to do is we do our best to stay above the fray. We don't think this should be a political issue at all. We don't think this should be a Democrat versus Republican, conservative versus liberal kind of issue. This is a basic American issue about a right that, according to us, is enshrined in our Constitution and is a right that we are born with, of course, when we become adults. And so, our office does what we can to say, look, you've lived your life, you've become an adult, you're an American citizen, you have this right, you fall into this category. And from there, our job, once you register to vote, because registering to vote is not automatic in Texas as it is in other places. Once you register to vote, we want to give you every opportunity that you can to cast your vote, regardless of where you live, regardless of what language you're comfortable speaking or writing or reading. If you can't read or write at all, regardless of your background. And now, in the midst of COVID-19, there is another element of we want you to be able to vote safely. This constitutional right of yours, this most basic fundamental right of yours, you should not have to choose between having your voices heard at the polls and, on the other hand, protecting the safety, the health of you and your family. And so, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's something that's extremely, extremely important right now, especially in the time where we are right now, where so many Texans, so many Houstonians, so many Americans are yearning for our voices to be heard.
I agree. And so what I heard you say was a lot of vision setting and a lot of how we really want our elections to go and how we want the voting process to go. So what was your vision for structuring the county clerk's office when you made your transition into that role?
Well, so again, there are sort of two major functions that this county clerk's office has. There is elections, and there is what we call administration, which is everything that's not elections that we do. And at the time, to fill people in on the situation that we were facing as I became county clerk. We had a county clerk who was elected in 2018. That county clerk had done a lot of things to make voting more accessible to the people of Harris County. But in May of this year, she unfortunately resigned, and and did so because of health reasons related to COVID-19. And so we're at a place at that moment where in the middle of May, and I was appointed about 10 days later, and I started officially on June 1st. So I started on June 1st. On June 29th, 4 weeks later to the day, our election was to begin. And so, to be totally transparent and frank, the administration side of the House kind of had to sit there. We had to focus on elections because an election of the magnitude that we're facing right now, again, in Harris County, the third largest county in the country, 2.4 million registered voters, that's hard enough on its own. Now add that we have a newcomer, we have COVID-19, we have these voter suppression issues that I've mentioned, and again, we have so many people who are going to have their voices heard. We had to get that right. And so, the first thing that we did was say, look, we're just going to focus all on elections right now. If I need to sign something for the other side, I'll do that, but we're focused on elections. From there, it was, look, what is needed in this time? And you heard me rattle off earlier, secure, safe, accessible, fair, efficient. What we created was what we call our SAFE elections plans, SAFE. And within that, as it related to security, accessibility, safety, fairness, efficiency, we created initially 23 separate initiatives that were targeted at achieving all of these goals that were so important for elections and the people of Harris County. And what we did, we said, look, first of all, I'm new, right? I have a team that's deeply experienced, right? I was 20 days into the job. We had many people who were 20 years into the job on my team, but I was new. And what I was aware of coming from the outside was that there were a lot of people and community groups and institutions who had great ideas and who were pointing out things that we could be doing better to deliver for the people of Harris County. And so I tried to be as inviting as possible to say, hey, these are some great ideas. Don't just give us the ideas. Come and work on those ideas with us. Let's build on these together. Let's come up with solutions together. Let's have your voices heard directly in the process, and you become an owner of that with us. And so many different nonprofits, particularly those focused on voting rights, as well as both of the major political parties, other members of county staff and offices across the county that were so important to the work that we do. We said, let's all get together and let's all work on this. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that so far. And so now, we're turning our eyes to November for what's going to be the largest election in Harris County history. But I'm also taking the time to look at the administration side of the House and say, what can we be doing to continue to provide those critical services? People need to get married still. So how do we make sure that they can come in and get their marriage licenses? People, my son was born 2.5 weeks ago. How can people get their birth certificates so that they can, get things on their insurance and whatever else needs to be done? These are very important records that help people in their day-to-day lives throughout Harris County. And so we're focused on that too.
That's awesome. Before I go to the next question, I do want to let folks know that they are free to drop any questions they have for Chris down in the chat box, or you can request the mic on the bottom right of your screen. But yeah, on to the next question. So I heard you talk a lot there about this collaborative effort when it comes to ensuring safe elections in Harris County. So, and I heard that you also really worked hard and you did outreach when it came to talking to these nonprofits, talking to civic orgs that are doing the same thing and have the same mission in mind. So how are you establishing these lasting relationships with community members to ensure that everyone's concerns are being honored at the ballot box?
Mm-hmm. I came in knowing that I did not know all the answers. And so, frankly, where we started in terms of, the organizations to engage and what community groups to make a part of this, frankly, at the beginning, those were the groups who reached out to me when they found out that I was appointed And they said, here are the 100 things you need to do differently, right? And I said, great, come on, let's do them together, right? Fast forward 8 weeks, I still don't have all the answers, but what we're doing, and this is on a daily and weekly basis, we're saying, hey, Texas Civil Rights Project, we brought you into the room. What other groups are missing from this room that we should invite, the next time we have this same meeting? And so just growing through those sort of word of mouth channels. We already in our office have voter outreach that's targeted at people in the Spanish speaking community, Vietnamese and Mandarin as well. We have a position that's targeted at African American outreach. That position was vacant when I started on June 1st. I'm happy to announce that just Friday, y'all are the first people to hear this. Just Friday, we extended an offer to fill that position, so that going towards November, we have someone focused on issues in the Black community. We had 2 other positions that were called, general outreach, and I said, well, general is not enough. So let's make sure we're reaching out to our senior citizens. Let's make sure that we're reaching out directly to young people and college students. Let's make sure that the LGBTQ plus community is included. And we have 4 official languages, but there are so many other people who speak so many other languages across Harris County. Let's make sure that we have outreach to those as well, right? And so, we do have specific positions, people whose job it is to reach out to these communities. But although we're bringing in so much feedback and so many voices to hear about everything we could be doing better, one thing that's really, really important to us is making sure that the polling places themselves are near where people can get to them, that they're on bus lines, that they're in neighborhoods that might be historically underrepresented or undercounted. And so we're especially getting feedback from all these organizations on the locations that we will have where people can vote in November.
No, and that's wonderful. So I heard you mention a bit about young folks. So I do want to ask specifically, how can young folks, especially listening in on this interview, how can they support in making sure that voting is more accessible in Harris County and in any county that they reside in Texas?
Yeah. Step one, and I know I don't have to say this to anyone on this call. Step one is if you're a young person, you need to be voting. You need to have a plan to vote. You need to be registered to vote. From there, you need to have all your friends do the same thing. My office, and Lisa, you know this, but my office, the county clerk's office, does not actually handle voter registration. That's handled in our tax assessor and collector's office. That's actually changing soon. Our county commissioner just voted to change that because, going back to what I said earlier, the reason why voter registration initially was handled in that tax office was because there was a poll tax. And so this is a vestige of Jim Crow era policy that we're addressing in Harris County. But for now, and going through November, you still need to register, and that's through our tax assessor collector's office in Harris County. I know, young folks, the internet, the way anything you can do digitally is much easier. Unfortunately, in Texas, you cannot register to vote online, but there are a number of tools that can help you. And so I'm going to share one of them. It's called registertovote.org. Register to the number 2 vote.org. If you go to registertovote.org, you can check to see if you're registered. And if you're not, you can fill in your information and they will mail you a completed registration form that you can just sign and put back in the mail. They even give you a stamp. And so, for young folks who want to have this process be as digital as possible, take registertovote.org and send that out to your, 100 closest friends. Put it on your social media so that people can register that way. And that might be the quickest and the most convenient way to vote for young people. The next thing you can do is, we are doing a much better job than we ever have been of informing all, Harris County residents of how to vote, where to vote, who qualifies, how you do these various things. And so you can follow us at Harris Votes on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. I think if you watch some of our videos and memes and posts more recently, you'll enjoy them, and hopefully you'll be able to share them. I'm excited that I'll give you another first announcement, Lisa. You're getting all these today. Bun B has told me that he is going to be supportive of our efforts to get out the vote going through November. And Bun B has always been an amazing advocate for Houston in general, but also for getting young and diverse folks involved in the processes. And so we're soon going to have Bun B commercials and things like that, and hopefully we'll have many more. We're still working on Queen Bee, but maybe we'll have an announcement there sometime in the future. But sharing, getting yourself registered, and then sharing with as many people as possible the information to get them registered and get them engaged, and ultimately get them out to cast their votes is how you can be most helpful.
Now, this is wonderful. And for folks who need those links again, it is Harris Votes, right, Chris?
Yes. So harrisvotes.com is where you can check us out. Follow Harris Votes at Harris Votes on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Hey, you can follow me too at CG Hollins. If you want to see my kids on top of voting information, then you can follow me personally. But then the other link, which is not associated with my office at all, but I want to share it, register2vote.org is where you can check to see if you're registered, where your friend, if your friends are registered, and then ultimately register if you're not.
So shifting from how young people can kind of get engaged to folks who are no longer youth, what can counties do within the current law to increase voter engagement, especially for young people?
So counties can actually do quite a bit, right? When you look at the law, there's a lot of laws, right, which you might be, many people are most familiar with, say, criminal law. The law tells you a bunch of things that you cannot do, right? And then what the penalties are. And so if the law doesn't say something about some other thing, that means you can do that, right? And we've taken a very expansive view of what we're able to do. One thing we haven't talked about a lot here, Lisa, is voting by mail. Voting by mail is the safest and most efficient way to vote. It's very convenient. You sit on your sofa, you fill out, who you want to vote for. You can take the time and Google the candidates to see who is best aligned with your values. You put it in an envelope and you send it back. You're not standing in line. You're not feeling pressured with a bunch of people behind you. You're not exposing yourself to, potential viruses. And so the first thing that I did in office, which no one else in Texas had done, I did this on my first day, was we sent out applications to vote by mail to every registered voter in Harris County who was 65 years of age or older. That is something that it costs money, to be clear. And there are some people who said, you're wasting taxpayer dollars by sending these out to people. I think we're saving lives by sending these out to people. And so we did that. And because of that, we saw record increases in applications to vote by mail. Applications to vote by mail from March of 2020, when we had our primary election, to July and our primary runoff, more than doubled. And we didn't see that anywhere else across Texas, but it's because we put that in front of our voters and gave them that option. We're going to do that again for our seniors. We're working with our attorneys right now to understand if we can send it out to everybody, because I do, again, want to stay within the bounds of the law. But if we can, we're going to send that same application out to every registered voter in Harris County and give you the information that you need to understand if you qualify to vote by mail, because not every person in Texas can vote by mail. We have very restrictive laws. But we're going to inform you. We're going to have a big red sheet of paper that says, read this. This is the law. And if you're eligible, go ahead and apply to vote by mail. And not only will it be safer and more convenient for you, but you'll be doing a service to the people of Harris County, because if they vote in person, their experience will be safer and more convenient because you won't be in there with them or holding a spot in line in front of them. And so be a patriot by registering to vote by mail.
So we hear why this was a no-brainer for your office to send out these vote by mail forms, especially being the first to do so in Texas. But what was that process like? What did it take? And did it seem impossible at first? What was that process like?
Well, you have a lot of folks. I'll say two things. I can tell you a thing about a lot of people. I won't even get into government in particular. I'll talk about people in general. We hate the way things are and we hate change, right? And so when you say, okay, we're going to do something new, people, often react, well, we can't do that. Well, we've always done it this other way. Well, this thing is keeping us from doing that. And, I'm a lawyer by background. I make sure let's read the law. Let's understand what we can and can't do. Let's rely on legal experts in this area and ask them what we can and can't do. But let's not automatically take no for an answer. Let's not automatically accept, hey, we've been doing this way since Kingdom Come, as this is the right way to do it. Those are two different things. The right way and the way we've been doing it are not always the same. And so I don't automatically take no for an answer. When you ask me something, I'm going to ask you why. And whatever you say after that, I'm going to ask you why to that. And I'm going to keep doing that about 5 times until I'm convinced that what you're saying is steeped in fact and steeped in logic and ultimately for this kind of thing, steeped in the law of the state of Texas. And if I'm not convinced, then we're going to go and do it. Of course, again, we're going to ask our county attorney's advice and we're going to follow that. But we're willing to take stands to do what we believe is right and do what we believe is legal to promote the right to vote and promote access to the ballot in Harris County.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I kind of want to shift conversation into the future, right? So when we think of these goals and these visions, we have to be forward thinking and we have to be innovative, especially in times like these, where we're experiencing multiple pandemics at once. So we know that Texas legislature will be convening next year in 2021. So what can counties do specifically to fight for to make sure that voting is more accessible for Texans?
So we need to be going and asking for laws to change, and we need to not do that and say, oh, this is a blue county and they're fighting for that, and this is the red county and we're fighting for that. I went to Colorado earlier this year. There are a number of states. Colorado is one of them. Utah is another one. Colorado, you might see, is a blue state. It used to not be. I think it's fairly bluish now. Utah is a very red state. Both Colorado and Utah, they share that in their states, you vote by mail 100% of the time. Now, you have the right to come in and cast your vote in person if you want to, mostly if you lost your mail ballot, but everybody votes by mail. And so when you hear politicians out there saying, oh, this is rife with fraud and X, Y, and Z, there's no data to back that up. None whatsoever. Our current president pulled together a task force on voter fraud just to look into mail ballot fraud issues. And that task force found no evidence of voter fraud at scale in America. And then that task force shut itself down after delivering those findings, right? And so this shouldn't be a red or a blue thing. And so I want to go and find an election administrator or a county clerk, who's Republican, and let's go together and let's talk about things that we can do that will make our jobs as elections administrators easier and make the polls accessible for our voters. I believe that nobody wants to go out and have a terrible election. Nobody wants to go out and have the longest lines in the world. Nobody wants to go out and take a day to report the results. Nobody wants people to walk away from the polls feeling dejected and disenfranchised. Maybe some people do, but most of the folks in the election administrators' offices and clerks' offices do not. And so how do we do that? How do we make it easier? Let's go and talk about some of the laws that may have been passed 50 years ago for a good reason, and that reason no longer exists. It might have been passed 50 years ago for a bad reason, and we need to go address that too. And then there's other things that you just might not be aware of, right? So one thing with mail ballots, especially now during COVID-19, some people don't trust the mail. Also the Postal Service has been slow during this time, and for a valid reason. So I have a question: why can't we spend time with our people in Congress, spend time with the Postmasters General, to understand how we can prioritize mail ballots during election time so that those move in more smoothly? Could we even have a special mailbox at the post office so people can come and drop their mail ballot in that one and feel confident that that's going to get to us? How can we track those through the mail system? And by the way, we're going to track those through the mail system in November of 2020 this year. But also, how can I just, if I can't get in the mail for some reason, can I just come and drop it off? The law says right now in Texas that you can drop your mail ballot off on election day between the 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. But you can only do it at the clerk's office. So what does that mean? Before I got in the office, what that meant was downtown at our headquarters, where there's no parking and where you got to come up to the fourth floor and X, Y, and Z. And that's just not feasible. Who's going to be able to do that? So I asked a bunch of questions. How can we change this? How can we improve this? Well, first of all, we just put a buzzer downstairs downtown so people can come and press the button and we'll come to you and get your mail ballot instead of you having to find parking. But also, we have 10 annexes across our county. So we're going to accept your mail ballot at all 10 of those. Why weren't we doing it before? Because nobody asked why, right? And so, but also, like, why can't we change this law to say we can accept your mail ballot at all the polling places? So then you have 800 drop-off points instead of 10. And so these are questions that are in my mind, questions that I want to, formalize and get smarter on, but ultimately put on paper and then go spend time in Austin, hopefully with many Republican and Democratic and nonpartisan counterparts asking for these sensible solutions to the issues that we face.
That's a great answer, Chris. And shifting to November elections, what is your vision for how you want to carry this out? It's going to be a big election, big year everywhere across the nation. What's your vision for November?
In many ways, I want to just continue and improve upon what we were able to do in July. Again, safe, accessible, secure, fair, efficient. There are things that we saw that are problems that we faced in previous elections. And of course, we said we want to make sure that we don't experience those same problems. In March, we saw people waiting till 2 a.m. at TSU to cast a ballot. We said we do not want another TSU. That was our poster board material. And then we saw Georgia and Kentucky voting. We said we do not want to be Georgia or Kentucky, right? So how do we do that? Going back to November of 2019, we saw that it took till the next day to announce the results of the election. And we said we don't want to do that. In March, they cut that reporting time to about half of what it was. It went from like 12 hours to about 6 hours, 7 hours. We cut it in half again in July. Now I'm, to 3 hours and change. I don't want to promise that we're going to cut it in half again for November, but we certainly want to continue to improve on that trajectory. Same thing for wait times. Again, we talked about TSU, and there were other TSUs that you didn't hear about in March. But when we got to July, throughout the early vote time frame, it was rare. It was extremely rare during early voting that you got to a polling place and your line was longer than 5 minutes, period. And we were very proud of that. we got to election day, there was, a surge in interest in this election, which, we set records for turnout in an election of this type. And we're very proud of that. Again, people are yearning to be heard. So that's one reason for it. But I also, we believe that people felt safe at the polls, that we did a good job. And when their friends or family voted, they said, no, it was fine. Go ahead. And so we saw a lot of people show up on election day. That having been said, at 90+% of our locations, you still saw less than a 5-minute wait all day to cast your ballot. And that 10%, these are some of the popular sites, Sunnyside, West Gray. To some of them, we deployed more voting machines during the middle of the day. But by the end of the day, the longest line was just over an hour. And, when we waited till 2 a.m. on March 3rd to close down those polls, the latest poll closed on July the 14th around 8:30. So an hour and a half. And so, to me, that's a really long line. But again, we took it from a nightmare scenario to one that was a little bit more manageable. And now we're looking forward to November to say, how can we do even better?
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. And I think that's something that needs to be stated over and over again, because oftentimes we can get caught up in the moment and think, oh my God, all these things coming together, like it's just a lot and it seems impossible. It seems like a big feat, but Harris County and your office, y'all were able to do it. And it's just going to get better in November. So thank you for that. I do want to open the floor up to some questions from some folks. So Desiree, she asks, what measures will Harris County be making to reduce the long wait lines we saw at the polls in March 2020?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, we've already started to act on that, and we saw drastic improvement. But just to talk specifics about that instead of just claiming success, one, vote by mail. The more that people can vote by mail, first of all, your line will be 0. You get your mail ballot out and you vote it, and that's it. But you're shortening the line for everybody else. And so the more people that can vote by mail, the shorter the lines will be. Number 2, more locations. In July, we had a record, the highest number of early voting sites that had ever been had in Harris County. In November, we're going to set the record again because we're going to go above and beyond that. And for election day, we're most likely, we're still in the planning processes, but we're most likely going to set a record for the number of locations across Harris County on election day. So having more places for people to vote. But what happens when you show up? Well, you've got to have the systems in place, right? So we need to have better machine allocation. That was the primary issue, digging in to the issues on, for TSU on March 3rd. It wasn't like, oh, we're out to make the Democrats' life terrible, or we're, people waking up in the morning thinking, don't let those black people vote. That's not what happened. What happened is that we gave every single polling location the same exact amount of machines. You got 10 Democratic machines and you got 10 Republican machines, regardless of where you were in the county, regardless of how big your location was, but regardless of how many people were going to vote there. That was not the best decision. The best decision is to say, how many Democrats are we expecting to show up to this location? How many Republicans are we expecting to show up to this location? Okay, let's divide it based on that. And so TSU, we know historically, is going to have far more Democrats voting, and so they should have far more Democratic machines and fewer Republican machines. There's other parts of town that place should have far more Republican machines and far fewer Democratic machines, because we have an idea of who's going to come and vote. And it's just math and it's just operations. And so you have to, solve some of these problems with that operational lens, right? UPS and Amazon are solving these problems every day. How do we deliver 1 million packages, yada, 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 2 days or less, right? We need to bring that same mind frame to government in general, but particularly to elections, because what we're doing is saying, how do we scale up a startup with 10,000 volunteers over the course of 2 weeks and allow millions of people to come and shop for our product over the course of that same 2 weeks and get in and out safely and conveniently, right? These are customer service and operational issues. They're not political issues. And so using that same frame of mind is how we solve some of those problems already, but how we're going to continue to do even better going towards November.
Thank you, Chris, for that. Jasmine says, can you please go into the laws you're currently helping fight that contribute to voter suppression?
Yeah. So first of all, most of these laws are going to be changed in the legislature. The Texas legislature meets for 5 months out of every 2 years. And so from January to May of 2021 will be the next time that the legislature is in session. And that'll be the best time where we can come and talk about some of these laws and policy changes. That having been said, we've been involved in a number of lawsuits to directly challenge these laws or constitutionally challenge them. The first one I'll mention is ballot by mail, right? We believe that one, look, it's great that our seniors have access to ballot by mail, but we have this thing in our Constitution called age discrimination. And giving one person access that another person doesn't have solely because of their age is unconstitutional. It's the 26th Amendment, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But it's one of the amendments. My law professors are going to be upset with me. And so we're fighting on that. We're saying, look, this is clearly safe because we're letting all these millions of people do it. Why not let everybody do it in a non-discriminatory fashion? That's one thing. Another thing that we just filed a lawsuit on a couple of weeks ago was during the time of COVID-19. People, we need to change the way that the law applies to folks who are in quarantine. And let me tell you what I mean by that. There's something called a late ballot, which if you become ill or disabled right before the election, then you have the right, under current Texas law, to get access to a mail ballot in a very expedited fashion. But that doesn't apply to people who are quarantined. And so if I say, hey, I feel okay, but I had a confirmed case of COVID that I was exposed to, and now I'm sitting in my house for 14 days for the safety of all of my neighbors, again, I have to make a decision at that point. Am I going to uphold my quarantine and then lose my right to vote? Or am I going to claim my constitutional right to vote and put all these other folks in Harris County at risk? We don't think that should be a choice that anybody has to make. And so we went to a court and said, look, if you're quarantined or if you're awaiting a result to a test, then you should the law should apply to allow you to have this late ballot. It makes sense. It's simple. It's not political. But we're still fighting that today. And I see us running out on time, so I'm going to stop there and see if there's any other questions.
Yeah, so we can close up. I don't see any more questions in the chat. But again, feel free to drop them and we can answer them on this call or afterwards. So Chris, just to close, we do have one pressing question for you. And that is, what quarantine hobbies have you picked up recently in the latest month?
Wow. Well, my most recent quarantine hobby is 2.5 weeks ago, we welcomed a son to my family. And so I've been spending some time with him and changing a few extra diapers over the last few weeks. I've of course, over the entire quarantine, had my share of Tiger King and, other classics of American film. I've tried to get back into reading and I've tried to get back into, outdoors. I mean, I think one of the hidden blessings of quarantine is that people value being outdoors now. And so I've tried to go and get my jog in and my bike in ways that I might have put aside before, but now that I deeply appreciate.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So everyone, again, you can follow Chris in Harris County and the County Clerk's office on all of the social medias that he let us know about earlier. And
at Harris Votes. And if you want to follow me personally, at CG Hollins.
Shameless plug. You can also go to texasrising.org to see if you're registered to vote. Make sure your friends also check. And there are just a lot of ways you can get involved and make sure that democracy actually works for all of us. Continue to come to these trainings and we'll plug you in. We really are serious about building a movement and making sure that we're all organized, especially as young Texans in this country. So thank you, Chris, for being on, and everyone have a great day.
Thank y'all. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, CWA.